The movie starts off with some men chatting and talking around the room. A person paints different structures on plain paper with the help of a brush. It seems like he is drawing something. The brush glides smoothly through the paper as a melodious sound plays in the background. With intense technique and patience, the painting continues on. We see a picturesque view of the sandy desert. It stretches on for miles and miles with nothing but the tantalizing sun and the soft sand. A place flies over the sand with 2 people in it. A woman sleeps as they travel through the desert, while the man looks down upon the place they're in. The place flies on when some men in the desert spot in. They shoot at the plane, which causes the plane to have numerous holes. The people in the plane duck and try to save themselves as they're poured with bullets from the ground beneath. The plane is about to crash as smoke gushes out of it. The man and woman passed out on the plane. In another scene, we see a nurse traveling through a train that consists of myriads of soldiers who were injured in war. She checks up on all of them and treats them with kindness. One of the soldiers tells her she's the prettiest girl he's ever seen, and she just shrugs. He has a huge crush on her and asks to kiss her, but the nurse declines, but he insists. She smiles at him and kisses him softly to help him heal. The other soldiers make fun of her and ask her for a kiss as well, but she walks off laughing. In one of the bunkers is an operating theater where a gravely injured soldier is brought. Some men of the desert find the wreckage and take the broken pieces and parts of the plane with them. They feel pity for the gruesome condition of the site. A deeply burned man lies on the ground, still breathing. Almost all of his body is burned, and he's being taken away. The men of the Sahara Desert look at all the burned man's belongings. They take his burnt body on a camel for further treatment. He's barely breathing and only produces some strange noises. Someplace afar, more injured soldiers are brought into a treatment camp with nurses tending to them all the time. There are numerous vehicles and soldiers in deadly conditions. A soldier who is completely bloodied requests to see someone from his village one last time at the camp. The doctor there asks the nurses there if anyone is from the poor soldier's hometown. Hana, the nurse from before, realizes the soldier is from the same regiment as her boyfriend. When they inquire about Hana's boyfriend, it is found that he was shot to bits and put to eternal sleep brutally in the war. Hana is shocked to hear this and loses all her senses for a while. Just then, the campsite is bombed. The doctor protects Hana, who's in no condition to save herself. Hana sobs violently after she realizes that the love of her life is dead. The doctor tries to console her, but she's devastated. Almasi, the burnt man, is brought to a cave with all the other people who saved him. A man puts herbal treatment on Almasi to help him heal while singing folk songs of his tribe. Almasi slowly opens his eyes to see where he is. It's October 1944. In Italy, many soldiers are getting healed and the nurses are working full-time. They're walking through the beaches and soon get back to the camp. Almasi has been brought there too. He's burnt beyond recognition but has healed a lot, thanks to the tribe he was saved by. A reporter there asks Almasi about his injuries and how he was found. Almasi goes on to explain his experience but can't remember most of the details. The reporter asks if he's German and Almasi declines. Hana constantly takes care of him. Almasi is certain that he isn't going to survive long enough. He apologizes to the reporter saying he can't help him further. Almasi and Hana are going somewhere in an ambulance as she makes sure he's okay. Another nurse, Jan, from a jeep behind, calls out to Hana and they talk about going to the bazaar. They're moving to a new place as they can't stay in one place for long enough, due to the fear of the Germans finding out and bombing them. Hana lends Jan some money and they carry on their ways. Suddenly, one of the jeeps bursts into flames because of the landmines placed all over the place. It's the same jeep that Jan was in. Hana panics and runs over to the wreckage. Hana is stopped halfway as all the people in the jeep are eliminated. The soldiers then look out for landmines which are laid all over the place, but Hana doesn't care. She's lost everyone in the war. She walks around recklessly and the soldiers yell at her to stop. One of the soldiers yells at her to come back to her senses. They go back to the ambulance and Hana starts taking care of Almasi, when a fellow nurse offers her condolences to Hana. Jan was Hana's best friend. Hana diverts the conversation as she doesn't want to talk about Jan. She tells the fellow nurse about Almasi and how he's dying. There's no point in moving him here and there. Hana starts to think she's a curse as anyone she loves gets put to eternal sleep. Hana pours all her feelings into Almasi. She sees a cathedral nearby and visits the place. It's beautiful but wrecked. Some of the rooms are well maintained. Hana decides it would be the perfect place to treat Almasi since he hates moving. The soldiers urge her not to do so, but she insists, saying she'll catch up to them once Almasi dies as he doesn't have much time left. One of them tells her the Germans are everywhere and she can't desert them, but Hana promises she'll be back soon. She is adamant about staying and gathers all the supplies needed for that. Some people help her carry Almasi and the supplies to the cathedral, and she finally bids them goodbye, promising to come to them soon. Hana changes into some comfortable clothes and cuts off her hair as she watches all the soldiers move to a new destination. She starts renovating the place however much she can. She tells Almasi about the library she found and Almasi requests her to read him some of the books. Hana agrees and promises to find some good books. Almasi has a book of his own, Herodotus, that he loves reading as he calls it the father of history. Hana offers to read him that for the time being. She feeds him some plums that she found in the orchard and they chat for a while. Hana finds a bathtub with running water outside the cathedral and bathes there. Almasi looks at his book and turns the pages, but he can't balance it and it falls to the ground. Lots of letters and photos fall out of the book, which contains a lot of his memories. That's when the flashbacks start. Almasi speaks the native language of the people of the desert, and he notes down everything he learns from the people there. He learns about the place there when a plane lands nearby. Almasi goes to the plane and meets the pilot, Jeffrey. The plane consists of many passengers, including a beautiful girl, Catherine. Almasi keeps on staring at the girl in awe, and finally settles down for drinks with the other men. Catherine is Jeffrey's husband, and the plane they arrived in was a wedding gift from her parents to Jeffrey. Catherine is introduced to Almasi and she compliments him. Almasi really isn't happy with Jeffrey and Catherine staying with him for a long time, but his friend, Maddox, insists, saying they're very smart and important people. Maddox and Almasi go flying and are soon joined by Catherine and Jeffrey. They pass through mountains and the clear sky. In the present, Hana is still taking his utmost care and requests to move his bed, so that he can enjoy the beautiful view before he eventually passes away. He asks her why she's taking so much care of him, and she just replies that she's a nurse and it's her duty. At night, Hana plays around in the cathedral as Almasi keeps remembering his adventurous past. Almasi and his group set up a bonfire and had fun there, just dancing and singing. Jeffrey and Catherine also enjoy themselves. All of them sing songs together and Catherine smiles at him as Almasi just stares at her. At present, Hana reads his book to him, which was long before talked about by Catherine. Catherine used to talk about the same book when they met in the desert. Catherine tells the same story as in the book and Almasi listens in carefully. He is reminded of Catherine as Hana reads him that specific story and slowly starts to fall asleep. In the morning, Hana shoos away all the crows clawing in front of the cathedral when a man approaches her. He claims to have been sent by her friend, Mary, to check up on her and see if she's okay. He even says that they were neighbors long before. Hana is skeptical but doesn't say anything. The man comes into the cathedral and hands her an egg from Mary. He introduces himself as David. As he's speaking, he drops the egg and Hana quickly takes whatever is left to cook it. They go into the kitchen and David sneakily steals some morphine from Hana. He tells Hana that he'd like to stay in the cathedral with them for a while as he has some work to do. He tells her he'll just stay at the stable and Hana tells him she doesn't need any company or someone to look after her. David agrees and decides to stay without disturbing Hana. Hana cooks the egg and brings it to Almasi. She tells him about David and he isn't pleased in the slightest, as he doesn't want anyone to look at him in such a condition. Hana feeds him the egg and David listens in on their conversation. Hana is trying to set up a curtain over Almasi's bed, but it's too high. David comes in to help and Almasi and him chit-chat for a while. They talk about the places they've been to. David happens to recognize him even when Almasi himself has forgotten his own name. Count Almasi was a very famous man and David knew about him. He even knows Catherine. Back in the past, Catherine roams around the Egyptian market and is soon found by Almasi. Catherine had just bought a rug, but Almasi tells her she has been cheated. But Catherine doesn't care. They get into a banter since Catherine feels as though Almasi doesn't like her. As Almasi tries to talk to her, she just smiles and walks away into the bustling market. At night, all the men meet up at a pub. Jeffrey comes in and brings Catherine with him. They all talk about their families. Everyone there is married except Almasi. They dance as the melodious song plays and Almasi asks Catherine for a dance. She agrees and they talk for a bit. The tension between them is intense. Almasi stares at her longingly. Catherine notices this but doesn't say anything. The night ends and Almasi comes back to reality. He feels exhausted and tired. He realizes that Hana had fallen asleep on him, which made him uncomfortable. He politely asks Hana to wake up since she was on top of him and he couldn't breathe. Hana wakes up and apologizes profusely to him. She goes to the kitchen and washes her face to freshen up, but soon, she breaks down crying. David finds his way to her and tries to console her, but she asks him to leave her alone. He asks her if she's in love with him and she doesn't say anything. He tells her that she's in love with him because she pities him, but Almasi is no saint. Hana retorts that she's in love with ghosts and so is Almasi. David doesn't have thumbs and he says the reason he lost his thumbs is because of Almasi. He urges Hana to ask Almasi who he really is and how many people he's eliminated. Hana just cries further and walks away, not wanting to believe anything about Almasi. David tells her that Almasi hasn't forgotten anything. Rather, he's only wanting to forget the ghosts of his past. Almasi overhears all of this and is hurt. He goes back to remembering his past. Jeffrey and Catherine had helped Almasi and his team further funding for their excursion, and they're celebrating it. Jeffrey has to fly back for work as Catherine stays with Almasi and his team. He promises to come back within a week. Almasi stops Jeffrey and asks him to take Catherine with him, claiming that the desert isn't so kind for a woman. But Jeffrey just says his wife loves the desert and is very happy to stay back. Almasi doesn't say anything as Jeffrey walks away. He sees Catherine looking at them from afar. Back in the present, Hana finds a piano and starts playing it as David injects himself with morphine. He's addicted to it. Almasy just stares at him as he does so. Hana keeps on playing when she's approached by a Sikh soldier. He asks her to stop and informs her that Germans left landmines even in the cathedral. He checks the entire piano for any signs of a bomb. He does, in fact, find a bomb hidden underneath the piano. The soldiers there ask Hana and the others to move out as the place could be infested with bombs. Hana tells this to Almasy and claims she could even marry him. Almasy teases her for it and Hana laughs as she puts clothes on his skin to soothe his wounds. Hana tells him 2 soldiers are staying with them to locate all the bombs in the area. The next morning, Hana sees them biking around. Almasy sings in his bed thinking about his past once again. Catherine and Almasy are driving together when she asks him about his love for the desert. He asks her not to speak so discreetly, but she continues. Catherine starts singing and asks Almasy to join her, but he just ignores her. They continue on their journey in the desert as he finds the place he'd been looking for. He finds a cave within the sandy mountains and smiles gleefully. Ha calls out for Maddox to check out what he's found. They all get to the cave to see loads of ancient engravings of people swimming. Catherine draws it all in a paper as the others start researching the place. The cave is extremely large. Almasy is traveling with another of his friends. There's an Egyptian boy, Camel, sitting on the roof of the jeep who keeps looking at Almasy. Suddenly, he falls off the jeep, and the jeep crashes and gets totaled while attempting to save Camel. Catherine and the others run to the totaled jeep and save Almasy and the other guy. No one gets injured, so Catherine and Maddox go back to get some more supplies for them to explore the cave. As they're going away, the jeep gets stuck and Catherine offers to stay behind as she doesn't want to be an extra burden. The others agree and Almasy and Catherine stay behind. Catherine finishes painting all of the engravings and hands them to Almasy to keep. Almasy says he already has pictures of them, but Catherine insists. He says the paintings are too good for his odd-looking scrapbook. Catherine is hurt and takes it back without saying a word. She tells him he didn't have to be so rude and walks away angrily. At night, she looks up at the sky while smoking. That's when Almasy comes and tells her to take shelter, because a sandstorm is coming soon. The storm is too strong and the men barely get by. All of them hide inside the jeeps. Almasy assures Catherine that everything will be all right. The sand covers everything and Catherine and Almasy are stuck within the jeep. He tells her stories to comfort her. He places his hand on her head and caresses her. They start to get closer as the night passes. The next morning, Catherine and Almasy rush out of the jeep as they're stranded in the desert. They run out and call for Maddox, but he's already driven far away. At that moment, he asks for the paintings she had first offered him and she agrees. They go back to digging out their team who are buried under loads and loads of sand. They're finally able to get them out. Catherine looks at Almasy's scrapbook and finds most of his belongings there. At night, they send out signals again, but to no avail. Catherine finally confesses that their plane isn't a wedding gift but belongs to the British government. She and Jeffrey were sent to get the whole view of North Africa by the government. Everything other than their marriage had been a hoax. That's when Maddox tracks them and they're happy to be found. Almasy has fallen in love with Catherine and she finally realizes it. At present, Hana goes to Almasy with food. The Sikh soldier whose name is Kip reads Almasy a book and she smiles at their sight. They get into a fun banter and Almasy tells Hana that he and Kip have a lot in common. He teases Hana saying she likes Kip, but she doesn't say anything. She adds that Kip is very indifferent to her, so it didn't even matter. They all chat and laugh out at jokes shared amongst each other. Back in the past, Almasy and Catherine finally get back to London. She invites him with her, but he reminds her that she's married and their proximity isn't good. She finally leaves and Almasy returns to his jeep. He's visited by Catherine once again. He's shocked to see her but doesn't say anything. She tries to slap him but he hugs her. She pushes him away but he doesn't budge. They both start making out and can't get enough of each other. He rips apart her dress and they make love. He even sings to her after. They start having a secret affair. Catherine starts bathing him and they chat. Catherine reveals she's been the happiest when she's with him. She gets into the tub with him and they make out again as they confess their love for each other. He tells her to forget him as she's married and Catherine walks out. She's disturbed by this. In the present, Hana looks at all the souvenirs and cards in Almasy's diary. She reads out all the notes he's written. She compliments his writing and asks about Catherine. He tells her about Catherine and goes back into remembering her. Catherine and Almasy are already in an affair and have fallen for each other. He confesses that he loves her and always wants to be with her. Almasy is in a room and Catherine is outside with all the other soldiers when she feels faint. She tells everyone that it's because of the heat and goes into the infirmary where Almasy is. They go into a secret room and he strips off her clothing. He feels all the crevices of her body as the people outside sing and have fun. Inside, the two make out and have romantic moments. Jeffrey arrives at the scene and sees Almasy going out. He doesn't think anything of it and goes to Catherine, who's laying on the hospital bed. He checks up on her and tells her they're going home, but she doesn't want to. She makes up excuses to not go. He hugs her and smells cologne on her. Catherine notices this and walks away immediately. In the present day, David stares at Almasy and he wakes up. David seems to know a whole lot about Almasy and tries to ask him discreet questions. Catherine and Almasy's affair continues. Jeffrey is out of town and decides to surprise his wife soon as it's their first wedding anniversary. Jeffrey continues to talk about how he and Catherine were the best of friends before they eventually got married. That's when we see David. He used to work closely with Jeffrey, who often called him Moose. He even gives suggestions to Jeffrey for his anniversary as he walks out. Jeffrey finally reaches home and sees Catherine running on the road, gleaming. He sees her get into a car and decides to follow it. He's already suspicious of her. Back at Almacy's house, Catherine lies naked on his bed and they romance each other. They're both laying on the bed and having fun banter. He caresses her body because he loves her a lot. Almacy tells her that he thinks Maddox knows about them. But Catherine just tells him that she's living a different life with him and loves him. Jeffrey stays outside the hotel they're staying in and waits for her while drinking. The two of them roam around marketplaces where he buys her a thimble. They go out together and finally bid each other goodbye. Jeffrey finds out about the affair and is devastated. Back at the cathedral, David accompanies Almacy. Hannah has a big crush on Kip and stares at him. She goes to where Kip is washing his hair to initiate conversation. She offers him some olive oil and runs away happily. Almacy and David listen to songs and Almacy asks David about his hands. He is ready to show Almacy when there's another flashback. It's 1942 and there's chaos all around. David runs around Tobruk and the soldiers there ask him to stay in the place to continue spying. The soldier tells David about Maddox and how Almacy betrayed him. Bombing continues as people in parachutes land on the ground. David is stranded in Germany, surrounded by enemies. He tries his best to keep his disguise but is caught by the German soldiers there. He is interrogated and tortured by the enemies because he's a spy. His code name is revealed to be Moose. The general threatens to cut off his finger if he doesn't speak up soon. David begs and begs for them to not mutilate him. He screams as they cut off his thumbs. David tells Almacy about how he finally escaped and eliminated the man who took his thumbs. He eliminated everyone involved in getting him caught. He finally reveals that he's looking for the man who told the Germans about the secret path to get to Cairo. It is none other than Almacy. David is here to put him to eternal sleep as well. In 1939, Almacy is telling Maddox about the ways to get into Cairo. Maddox is stressed as the war is about to begin and all international expeditions are about to be aborted. They're in Egypt and might not be able to go back home. At night, Catherine is watching a documentary when Almacy joins her. She tells him that she can't do it anymore. She cries and tells him that Jeffrey is suspicious and this can't continue anymore. He begs to be with her but she leaves nonetheless. The next day, Almacy joins Maddox, Catherine, and a bunch of other people for dinner. He behaves strangely the whole time. Everyone is awkward because of him and his speech. Maddox tells to shut up and to not embarrass him further. Almacy keeps silent and they enjoy dinner. Afterwards, everyone starts dancing and he's jealous of seeing Catherine dance with another man. When he catches up to her, he asks what she was doing in a very rude manner and Catherine is upset by this. He asks her how she can be so calm about leaving him and not caring at all. Catherine hides her face so as to not get caught with him. He asks her to dance with him but she declines. He wants to touch her and tells her he owns her body but she angrily walks away. At present, Almacy sees Hannah sitting beside him. It's late at night and he asks her to go to sleep. She agrees and walks out to find candles on the floor leading up to a place. She follows it and enters a stable-like place. She meets Kip there and is excited to see he did all that for her. He takes her to the place where all the murals and paintings are and securely fixes her to a rope. He hands her a torch and makes her glide all across the large murals. She giggles in excitement and enthusiasm. She thanks him for it and they kiss. One thing leads to another and they make love. They talk about sweet nothings in bed and spend the night together. The next morning, Sergeant Hardy comes and summons Kip for work. It's regarding bombs and Hannah tells him not to go as she's scared he will get put to eternal sleep. Kip assures her he'll be fine and finds a large bomb. He slowly tries to open it as Hannah desperately tries to find him. She is riding her bike to him when two tanks full of soldiers pass by. This causes the ground to shake. Kip panics because of this and tries to attempt the bomb as fast as he can. Hardy asks the tanks to stop as the impact could cause the bomb to blast. The fuse of the bomb snaps and it's about to explode. He has to defuse before the tanks arrive. Luckily, he manages to defuse it just in time and they're all saved. Hannah arrives in time and hugs Kip. It's a beautiful day as the war seems to be over. At night, it rains and all of them run to enjoy the raindrops on their faces. They even take Almacy with them since he has been longing for rain for a long time. They all run around in the rain and have fun. They continue dancing to the music. Hannah asks Kip to dance as well. Almacy looks at them and sings along as well. Suddenly, there's a blast and Kip immediately looks out. Sergeant Hardy and the other soldiers drink and celebrate victory. Hardy climbs on top of a statue and dances as a dare. David and Hannah continue dancing but Kip runs out. Turns out, the statue was a landmine as well and Hardy stepped on it. Kip arrives at the scene and finds out that Hardy was brutally put to eternal sleep. The next morning, Hannah tries to talk to Kip but he doesn't want to. He shuts her out even though she begs him to talk to her. She storms away angrily. At night, she overhears the conversation between Almacy and David. David tells Almacy about how he found Mary and eventually Hannah and him. David tells Almacy about his betrayal and how he helped the Germans to attack the British headquarters. Hannah is taken aback by this. David continues about how he was tortured back in Tobruk and Almacy was one of the causes behind it. Almacy had taken a German spy to take pictures of all the people in the British headquarters. and those photos were how the Germans had recognized David and tortured him. Almasy confesses that he did it to get back to the desert and didn't care what happened next. David yells at him, saying thousands of people could have died because of him, but Almasy doesn't care. David continues on and says Maddox took his own life after he found out about Almasy's betrayal and how he had become a German spy. Almasy tells David that he was never a spy. He's devastated to find out about Maddox's suicide. Back in Egypt, Maddox warns him about spies, and Almasy nods. Maddox tells him that he'll leave a plane for Almasy if he wants to come back, and Almasy agrees to it. They bid each other goodbye and Maddox walks away. David further accuses Almasy of eliminating the Clintons, and he tries to defend himself but cannot. He cannot talk about Catherine without hurting. He finally tells David that he might have eliminated them, but it wasn't with intention. Back in the desert, he was packing up their base camp at the cave they had found. Jeffrey had offered to fly him back home and Almasy had agreed to it. Unbeknownst to him, Jeffrey already knew about his affair with Catherine. He tries to hit Almasy with the plane, but Almasy saves himself just in time. The plane hits the ground and is shattered to pieces. Catherine is there too, and both she and Jeffrey are gravely injured. He tries to save her as Catherine tells him that Jeffrey knew, and this was his way of getting revenge. Jeffrey is put to eternal sleep at the scene. Almasy pulls Catherine out and takes her back to the cave. Catherine makes conversation with him the whole time and he smiles. Catherine is still wearing the thimble he bought her and she tells him that she's always loved him. This makes Almasy emotional and he breaks down crying but continues on to take her to the cave. He lays her down on the ground and lights a fire to warm her up. He tells that most of her body parts are broken and he'll have to go to the city to get things to heal her. He assures her that he'll come back to her no matter what, and Catherine agrees. Catherine asks him to promise to come back to her and he does. She asks him to bury Jeffrey as well on his way because none of this was his fault. Almasy agrees and kisses her one last time before going back to the desert. He runs around the desert and he speaks to himself loudly. He never stops and walks for 3 days to get to the city. He walks on and on as he had promised Catherine he'd be back. That's when a soldier spots him. Almasy stands in front of a soldier on guard there, who asks him for identification. He ignores this and begs for a doctor for Catherine and some morphine. The soldier doesn't care and asks him for his name. Almasy tells him his name and job whilst begging for someone to go with him. He tells the soldier that his wife is dying and needs help. The soldier doesn't listen to his pleas and Almasy gets irritated. They don't help him because of his foreign name. He grabs the soldier and starts to choke him when he's hit on the head with a heavy object. He's knocked out. Catherine is in the cave alone and writes down a letter to Almasy, as she knows she's going to die soon. Almasy finally wakes up and sees the soldiers taking him away. They have misidentified him as a spy. He screams out for Catherine, but no one listens to him. He's thrown into a train bunker with no way out. The soldiers open his cuffs to take him to the toilet, but he takes this chance to free himself. He jumps out of the moving train and runs back to Catherine, but he couldn't reach her in time and she died in the cave all alone. He was desperate to reach the cave anyhow, so he took the help of the Germans to keep his promise. He sold off his expedition maps with all routes noted down to get back to her. He got the plane Maddox had left him in return and immediately flew back to Catherine. He tells all of this to David and he finally finds out about the whole life story of Almasy. After all this, he was still named as the English patient even though Catherine had died because of his name not being English enough. David tells him he can't eliminate him anymore as he sympathizes with Almasy, to which he replies that he had already died years ago with Catherine. The morning sun sets in and Kip tells Hannah that he's been posted to a place far away. He tells Hannah about Hardy and his poor fiancée who couldn't handle herself after his death. Hannah tells Kip that he definitely loved Hardy, which is why he's mourning his death. Almasy keeps thinking about the day he reached the cave. He goes back into the cave, expecting the worst. He sees Catherine laying down and lays down right beside her. He's zoned out when Hannah checks up on him. He tells her he hasn't died yet and Hannah breathes a sigh of relief. He tells her he's ready to die and isn't scared of death. Kip calls out to Hannah to bid her goodbye and Hannah meets him one last time. He promises her that he'll meet her soon and Hannah smiles, but deep down, she's hurt that he's gone as well. Hannah returns back to Almasy and tells her to overdose him with morphine as he doesn't want to live anymore. Hannah obliges as she cannot see his pain but breaks down crying. Almasy requests her to read to him one last time as he passes away and Hannah agrees. Hannah reads him the letter Catherine wrote him, as Almasy reminisces his last moments with Catherine before succumbing to his death. He remembers caressing her face and her body one last time as he drags her dead body out. Almasy soon dies too and Hannah stops reading. She smiles as she's finally free of his pain. She's about to leave the cathedral when she sees Almasy's book and takes it with her. David sends her away and she goes back to her team like she had promised.